I write things down. I write things down. By things, I mean thoughts. My thoughts having been shaped by words heard in a classroom where I was herded. By herded, I mean as if by a shepherd. One example could be I was herded to daycare while mommy went bowling for Columbine. Not the flower, the murder. Alan Blaine to some family to separate from one of the few other Allens, personally picking Paco as my pronoun to honor Dr. Torrance Francisco Guasp. That was in 2019. As far as I know, the only Salt Paco. Still, I know people that gave up on God because they prayed, open quote, God, if you are real, send a white dove to my window ledge, close quote. I I lived near the guy when I was in ninth grade. I knew another about the same time, the late 1970s, early 80s, who saw a storm so intense he was sure God was telling him a message. I personally know the man who was fired for laughing at him and telling him to grow up. The fired man's name was Ralph Gilbertson. He did not respect the family of the money he married into. So there's that. I write these things down so you don't have to guess you are blessed. When you hear me brag about my adopted older brother, Christ Jesus, I'm treated like a bunso or a paco to him. I could have spiritually laid my head by his feet right on his throne. I could have at one time in the spirit world, but I felt it would be showing off to his presently serving angels. That's my life, or something like that anyway. I'm treated and I'm acted like, and I act like a chosen vessel when I'm in the spirit, in the presence of God. I don't know what other entities people see when they do mushroom that warn them the Nephilim are clowns. Don't do anything the government says is illegal. It's bad. I'm treated and I act like a chosen vessel in the act of being called every second of my life. I bet that was a mouthful. Still, I want to talk about why I call myself Paco and why I have worn this bracelet ever since that day the man gave it to me. Every day since that renaming God's God's looks like I tried to spell something in Greek. God people while others encourage them to go crazy. Like P. Diddy and Naomi. The exact opposite of a biblical Naomi mentioned in the book of Ruth. I'm only kidding you a little. Anyway, better than being sifted like sand because I mean, it feels good to be where I'm at right now. I've suffered pain. I'm not in the pain right now. But for some, this is like the light at the end of a funnel cake. Just just kidding. It's like the light at the end of a tunnel. There's a new person named Papa Bull. How are you, Papa Bull? You got a lot of words going there. Kali Yuga, Tite Yuka. Boom. You need to listen to me because I'm the Paco. Hola, Luther. Que pasa? How are you? Good to see you, my man. Here's a disclaimer for you. I got to disclaim this. Fair use disclaimer showing other videos giving my advice on spirituality, finance, and medical. You want the world's, go to the world. We ain't selling the world here. The world sells a lot of things. I'll come back to the Bibles later. We've got these. Oh, wait, here you go. Something about the Pete Diddy thing. This is what the world has in mind for you. This is their keep it up, keep it. Let's lose our minds and go effing crazy. I keep on hoping we'll eat cake by the ocean. What? Let's lose our minds and go fucking crazy. Keep on hoping we'll eat cake by the ocean. Walk for me, baby. I'll be pretty, you'll be Naomi Mahal. But we know what those guys do, man. We know what they want for your children. They're cooking them and eating them while they're rocking the world into anything but Christ mentality. There were days of old, there were sons. They beget sons. One time, this whole thing is, I'm still mad because JT that loves JC, he thinks it's silly, that the Nephilim could have been on one person in the ark. They obviously was two incursions where angels came and mated. That's not what Bible teaches. That is digging in on the book of Enoch and saying it's got to be right. There were two incursions instead of realizing you are doing it way wrong. What is this Bible verse? I gave from as far as the river, the middle border, the sons. All the time it talks about sons. It's talking about them being born. These were regular people. There were sons of God who were chosen, and then there were sons of the others who ended up being big time whores. Didn't know how to do it. What is sleep? Sleep. I'm looking for that in like the long sleep. I'm going to come back to these Bible verses here. Yashin, and he slept, chronic sleep, fell asleep. First he slept, and man took a rib out and made woman. Sleep and dream. It is of old. The sleep of leprosy in the skin, a chronic leprosy. The Bible has to be parsed. We're going to get into it. Have you ever remembered arm over back seat, look out rear window before backing up car? For some reason, that stayed in my mind. And I remembered, when I was 15 years old and we were taking to get a driver's license. I think it was 1974. And you had to put your right arm and turn and look back through your rear window. Who can do that today for most people? Let's face it. Most people by the time they're 35 have onset diabetes. They're fat, they can't turn, they can't touch their toes, do a deep knee bend. If you could throw a penny on the ground, they might want to pick it up if you told them that's a rare penny worth $100, but nobody's going to do 100 deep knee bends for $1 to pick up pennies. Hey, Papa Bull, I'm so glad that you like the videos. I was geocentric in 1995. Was it Dr. Voss, VOS or Loss or something like? Geocentric is when you prove that the math works both ways, you might as well go the Bible way and just believe in our Lord. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for your blessings and the mercy. This was lame.
Franchising would-be voters, literacy tests, inaccessibility of voting. You'd have to go 10, 15 miles on a horse and wagon to get to the county seat to vote. You were not likely to vote over those muddy roads, whatever else. Half of the adult population was denied suffrage because they were women. American Indians had no access to the ballot. About one-fourth of both men and women had no vote because they were held in bondage.
What he's trying to say is most white men couldn't vote either. So this to make this a woman issue, like, oh, women couldn't vote. Neither could 95% of the men or more. This was never solved by, oh, we need to get the vote out, but got the right vote.
Even the African Americans who would gain their legal freedom, the black people who would gain their freedom in both the North and the South, which was a small portion, but none was allowed to vote until the passage of the 14th Amendment. The question comes.
A few were allowed to vote after the 14th Amendment, but not very many and not for very long. And they did Reconstruction and they changed all of it. The voting have always been a joke. This is a reset, people. Blah, blah. Here you
Gave
go.
voice to the crassest class prejudices. I just quoted you a few examples. They talked about how the people unreliable, the people couldn't judge, and all that sort of thing. Their concern was to diminish popular control and resist all tendencies toward class equalization or class justice, or what they called in that day leveling. Their opposition and their distrust of democracy, and by democracy they meant what Plato and Aristotle meant by democracy, and what I mean by democracy, they.
This is the rewrite. And when they look for democracy, they're selling you, telling you your vote matters when it doesn't matter. Everything has to be viewed through the rewrite lens of the hidden history, the hidden 1,000 years, this 1711. It has to work off the numbers that the Bible gives. And when there's been a reset, because the late great planet Earth and the 1978 mentality that brought us Israel is the center of the world and the New Testament. And when they build a new temple and do this, that, and the other thing, everything will be fine. The world will be set for all those Jewish people to be gathered there and killed, and the other people will suffer for 7 years while you're laughing, having been raptured. It's convoluted, I know, but we got to keep going. Do you want to eat? And these guys did it. They're in on it. It's the Rosicrucians, it's the Jesuits. This is a rewrite of history of whatever happened. They're not giving you the whole story. It's recent. This was 100 years ago when they're saying women just want to be free. In the 1890s, do you think women were thinking, I just want to be free? Or were they thinking, I want my man to bring home a good paycheck. I want my children to be happy. I hope that the other girls don't pick on me or think I'm ugly or whatever. It's like today. What is this?
Smoking a cigarette in public was considered absolutely unacceptable, a trademark behavior of prostitutes and rebels. But something curious happened during the Easter parade in New York. Dozens of elegant women lit their cigarettes simultaneously, calling them torches of freedom, a symbol
Freedom.
of female emancipation. Sounds cool, right? What these women didn't know was that they were starring in the first major social engineering experiment of the modern era. Behind that spontaneous demonstration was Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, working for the American Tobacco Company. Bernays had discovered something revolutionary. You don't need to sell a product. You just need to sell an identity, a feeling, a dream. Using his famous uncle's psychoanalytic theories about the unconscious mind, Bernays turned smoking from a male vice into a symbol of female empowerment. Within a few years, Lucky Strike sales to women exploded. More importantly, this marked the birth of something called the engineering of consent.
Wow, that sounds ominous. The engineering of consent. Now, my position is as a smoker, and I want to let you know this is what's different. That would have been good. Get the women smoking cigarettes until the tobacco industry realized it's only helping them. What we need to do is add, I think the present is 219 carcinogenic ingredients that are added to cigarettes to make them more addictive. It's like putting lead in wine back in the day to make people get drunk more and go crazy. They poison the cigarettes so that they can say cigarettes cause cancer because you can't legally say organic tobacco causes cancer. So there's that. Oh my goodness, the cake by the ocean, right? They want to be Diddy and Naomi. Let's don't. How about we don't? How about we understand we're being manipulated, have been manipulated, and I know it's not always about cigarettes.
Designed to spread specific values, behaviors, and aspirations.
P. Diddy, it's a whiteout. Come to P. Diddy's white party. Are they showing that if I could only go effing crazy? Uh-oh.
Everything we've discussed so far is just the tip of the iceberg, the visible mechanisms for those with eyes to see. But there are much deeper layers where this engineering has infiltrated. In fact, every foundational
Look, they're going down a
institution of
rabbit hole.
society, financial, pharmaceutical, food, educational, and even spiritual, operates under this same command. The command of those pulling the strings without any.
Stop it. Go.
Knows that swapping leaders without transforming consciousness just perpetuates the cycle of oppression in new forms. The real revolution will not be televised. It can't have.
Man, it's funny that I wrote a book called The Televised Revolution as a subtitle. That was the subtitle. Grace Porter. You should check it out, man. It predicted the mud flood, the people coming out of the, even a, what?
Prepared and planned by the SA thugs, and for this purpose, the appropriate means, that is clubs, were also prepared, so that these brawls, which were then also...
These Oddfellow clubs, Moose, Elk, Lions clubs, Freemason clubs, they always have the same idea. They want people to join a club and then they'll beat you over the head with it.
Reported in the newspapers and also about the contents of the speeches had an effect that was effective in the media.
Some ran with it because their beliefs coincided with those of the party. Others because they were afraid to go against the party.
That would be
the
me.
Propaganda of the National Socialists was by no means a surefire success.
It always worked in the context of the use of violence, with the statement,
yikes, they love to use the violence. What? Come on.
Streets covered with flowers, and you see enthusiastic young people. But we happen to have the deployment plan for this reception, and there you can trace in minute detail how these images were created and how the whole thing was staged, how the various party formations...
It kind of reminds me of this enthusiasm of the young women who just happened to be waiting at the airport. Oh, the Beatles are coming. I want to go down and scream and go effing crazy. Ow.
Were lined up along the streets all morning, and how at a certain point in time BDM girls and Hitler boys then began to scatter the flowers over the streets over which the Mercedes would drive.
From the very beginning, Hitler's appearances are staged. In the film Triumph of the Will from the Party Congress in 1934 in Nuremberg, Leni Riefenstahl made the dictator appear like a messiah.
And then when he got shot in the ear and he rose up and he said, fight, fight, fight.
The myth of the frontline soldier of World War I was, of course, nurtured during the Weimar period. For propaganda purposes, the frontline soldier was always the hero.
Der Held stirbt.
It was their version of getting somebody to kill a commie for mommy.
Goebbels hat auch den Versuch unternommen.
Goebbels also attempted to use atrocity propaganda, such as the pictures taken of Soviet atrocities against the
And the hard thing was that so many people shared the same vision as the Nazis. They didn't like the Jewish people. They didn't like the Irish. Everything was just insane. Brazil was a big deal. Really?
Paulistano, the official newspaper of the Sao Paulo Republican Party, a periodical where he would gain the position of editor and become close to Minad Delpita, a poet and writer for the same newspaper. Through this contact, he would timidly participate in the Modern Art Week in 1922, conforming his ideal of nationality with the publication of his first novel, The Stranger, in 1926, joining Minad Delpita, Giano Riccardo and Candido Modafilio to organize the Green and Yellow Movement, a nationalist wing of modernism.
What's that noise?
In 19
Must be something going through my steam pipes.
1928,
Crazy.
he was elected state deputy in Sao Paulo. The social issue that will drag us from one moment to the next to Bolshevism. The empire bequeathed to the republic a united, homogeneous country. The republic, in another 20 or 30 years, will have completed its work of dissociation. He returned on October 4th, one day after the start of the revolution, defending Washington Luis in Correio Paulistano. He believed it was a liberal revolution. With the victory of the revolutionaries, he gradually changed his position. He considered the revolution incomplete, but that at least it spared the work of sweeping away the police.
What I'm trying to get across here is that not only the United States, this whole, everything is in the context. We have a history. They've embellished it, they're changing it, they're adding to it, they're fitting in the extra 1,000 years. They're having their whiteout sex parties to go crazy like P. Diddy and Naomi. And still they have to make TV shows to say like, well, we're normal or something
From there,
in
he
every
would
country.
formulate the structures of a political institution. In February of that year, the CP, Society of Political Studies, was founded, bringing together intellectuals and university students to discuss.
It's amazing to me how all the countries everywhere, all the time, find these intellectuals, and they gather them together and they convince the people through propaganda, maybe, that here's the smart people that got it figured out. These people had it figured out from the very beginning. The big takeaway, there's a few people watching now. This is the big takeaway. This is what they did. This is where we are right now. Everyone believes a form of this along with their globe and their evolution because this is their propaganda. We have known it for years. They want you to believe that they can kill everybody on the planet like God did when Noah's flood, when they can't. They can bomb people. They want, this is going to be bad, but there's no atomic weapons. There's no dark matter that somehow helps you slingshot around the moon and fly through the sun because it's not really there. And then you can start a colony on Mars because this happened. Oh no, this happened. And now we have, oh no, one world or none. So long. Yeah, I'm always amazed by how long they give you to, they'll put up a caption in an old movie, silent movie. You have to read it. It's like, really, does it take a minute to read 2 sentences?
Through the years, the science scientists of the world have freely exchanged their knowledge. This worldwide search for truth.
So apparently they're thinking there was a worldwide search for truth that had stopped after 1945. This is before the United Nations kicks off, a year before they decide to say, Israel's a God-blessed country. Let's make it a country again. But this is the same plan, one world or none.
Led to the greatest of all discoveries, atomic energy. No one scientist or
That's a flat Earth map. That's the azimuth equal distance map, which can't be a true flat Earth map, even if they want you to believe in geocentricity and question the globe and they present this map. You see, the center of the flat Earth disk is Jerusalem. It's a land mass. So, but this is close. I like it. It seems like it works. It's like geocentricity, flat Earth. You can make the math work on a lot of things. I like it.
Is responsible. The periodic law of the elements was discovered relativity by Einstein, a German.
I wonder why it was important that they'd say, a German.
Nucleus by Rutherford, a New Zealander. Atomic structure
White
by the
people.
Dane,
White
Niels Bohr. The positron by Anderson of the United States. The neutron by Chadwick of Great Britain. Artificial radioactivity by the Joliots of France. Uranium was transmuted by Fermi of Italy. The mesotron theory was developed by Yukawa in Japan. Barium was derived from uranium by Hahn of Germany. Uranium was split by Meitner of Austria. This pooling of knowledge is shared by all. There is no secret. When a neutron strikes, the atom is split. Released neutrons split other atoms. The result is atomic energy.
So apparently, as of the time this preserved, foundation was getting this movie to preserve, they were sharing all the information about, now we have the atomic weapons. Seems like they were keeping it secret. They said faking it. It's mafia world.
Shall the people of the world use this energy for the destruction or the betterment of mankind? The United States used this power to destroy Hiroshima.
No, it didn't. It faked it.
A flash, a blast, the release of deadly radioactive rays, and in a matter of seconds, downtown New York would be a mass of ruins. Throughout the entire lower end of Manhattan, most people would be dead. All buildings from Washington Square to the Battery would be destroyed.
But not all of them. Not really. But anyway, this was the fear. Now they have fission and everything. And oh my goodness, it's always been. How many times have you heard that? Oh my gosh, they are massing armies at the border. Hasn't the rapture been imminent since 1978 when they released the book, Late Great Planet Earth? How many times was that guy married? A lot.
Till 168. Japan's war against the United States ended after a B-29 dropped one atomic bomb that killed close to 100,000. Axis powers, they could have conquered the world.
Oh man.
There would have been no defense against this weapon. A single plane could have broken through to destroy the heart of London. V2s with atomic warheads could have destroyed England.
It's the V2s. It's the Rocket Men, from Jack Parsons to Warner von Braun. They're a one-trick pony. They have one thing. This was considered the first propaganda atomic scare film. Now, the scariest part is none of it was real. It was only used as propaganda to scare people because they know that it's Satan short season. They know it's all a lie. They know Elon Musk isn't going to take anybody to Mars and it's going to be okay. They had to do it. Imagine the destruction inflicted in seconds on an American city. Oh, no, we can't do it. Again, quote from it, Napoleon killed maybe a dozen. Somebody stabbing with a spear kills one at a time, but now they can kill 100,000 in a second at Hiroshima. This is what I've lived with for my 68 years. Well, 68 in a couple of months. Can't even say I'm 67 and a half. But in reality, I want to live another 20 years. It's not like, oh no, I'm 67. I should start thinking about dying because I've had diabetes for 20 years. No, I haven't. No, I don't think I'm. This spiritualist movement started right after, 1711, Satan's loosing, the end of it. Lilydale, a hamlet connected with the spiritualist movement. New York, there have been nothing but a search for people to have utopias, not utopias. Just one of the many. They were doing this on their own. So that's different than a government sponsoring it, right? Featured by HBO. No one dies in Lilydale. Well, that's interesting. Spiritualism was a big deal. The seances, the evolution, and the way the Trinity and all of the fake religions of, it seems like until recently, until the flat earth nation, when people started saying, hey, let's read the Bible correctly. Jesus said he was coming back in that generation. Let's say he did. That means there was 1,000 years, and then your orphan-trained brain took over. Hey, have you ever heard of the Resettlement Administration? I'm serious. Not a rhetorical question. We know 1933, the New Deal, federal agency. This was 1935. It relocated struggling urban and rural families. Now, this would have been 6 years, 5.5 years after the start of the Great Depression. Wasn't that, October 1929? So they're building towns for urban and rural families. And remember, this was the time when there were Nazis. This was the time when there was white baseball leagues, black baseball leagues. This was the time of the United States having that second resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, I went over this book I bought about the two colonies of Alamosa, the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints, and the Dutch Calvinists. Nothing in there about the Freemasons, nothing in there about this town was supposedly built as half was a great supporters of the Ku Klux Klan and half couldn't stand the Ku Klux Klan. But there's no history of any of it because many of the people in power were still members of the Klan. And that is less than 100 years ago. So all of the things going up to World War II after World War I with the United States in mind has to be viewed through that lens. We had white baseball leagues, black baseball leagues, white movies, black movies, and who was in power? Only the white people. We don't get that in the local history. We don't get it in the history. We don't get it in the newsreels. And there's a reason why. If you're just recently joining me, like most of you, you need to go back and watch the beginning, and because that's how we get to these resettlement administrations from a planned utopia to a utopia of rats living alone in isolation, having been conditioned by vaccine protocols to witness what's happening. That's what we do. All we need is a internet connection, and they're happy. We're happy. Farm security. So it didn't end ever, really, this resettlement stuff. At first, it was renamed Farm Security, Alphabet Agencies. This is a lot. This is only one portion of it. 650,000 people from an agriculturally exhausted, worn out land was unpopular among the majority of the land. They wanted to move 1,000,000, 3/4 of 650,000 people off of an exhausted, worn out Armageddon land. The goal seemed communistic to some, but they did it. The Dust Bowl happened in their recent history. All we know was less than 100 years. So this Tugwell resigned. He said, you know what? You got 95 camps. They're doing it. 75,000 people who had the benefit of the camps were a small share of those in need. And even they could only stay temporarily. He resigned the next year. What does this mean? Wanting to prevent red baiting campaign against him from affecting the agency. They were going to call him a commie. Red tagging is an intention to discredit the validity of a political opponent and the opponent's logical argument by accusing, denouncing, attacking, or persecuting the target individual. Now, that's like one of their planned things that they do. Remember the Bill Clinton, when they figured out his strategy was always deny, counter accuse, deny. And it works. I've people try it on me all the time, and I catch them sometimes. Look at all of these towns that were founded by them. So these are utopian communities in the United States. All right. So these weren't all founded, but a lot of the utopian things like the Amana, the Oneida colonies, they turned into sex cults. People who wanted to be, they were religious sex cults. Utopians didn't believe in Jesus. Here's 72 pages talking about them. And I couldn't look at them all, but Pullman, Chicago, that's one everybody pretty much knows the story of. The guy who made like Hershey and Pullman, they had company towns, and they give them credit for all of building all of these mud flood things because it was a company town. These guys did high-end sleeping cars for trains. The Panic of '93, a big part of the silver history, everything. The Guggenheim's Federation of Egalitarian Communities, never heard of it. But they wanted utopias. Everybody's always wanted utopias. 1967, 74. There's never been an end. I suppose people are going to say, well, Ellen the Salt Paco wants to have a utopia. I'm not saying it's going to be nothing but hard work. You kidding me? Living in the San Juan Mountains in the winter, hiding from bad guys who want to kill us. No, not a utopia. You're not welcome unless you're ready to get yourself to work and get yourself in shape to work. So I wouldn't call that egal. What is it anyway? A central principle of these communities that is in exchange for a member's working quota, 35 to 42 hours per week, the community pays for all aspects of their lifestyle. Members do not typically get salaries. Instead, they have small allowances with which they may buy luxury items. They can't be very luxurious for $75 a month. Not even if it was $75 a week. I don't think that's. Yeah, you should be getting that. You should be getting $75 a day. I think if you want to make any money to buy a luxury. I've been to some of these. The mothership, Oregon. Never heard of that one. Amana colonies. Look at how many there were. And I do accuse them of being one of those things that turned kind of sexual. I know they make great washers and dryers and things like that, but they got kind of weird. Let's see if we could do it there. Hey, a guy named Rock had both grown displeased with the Lutheran Church and its. Well, they were Trinitarian, but at least they were trying to be consistent, doing their best to maintain somehow. But anyway, I don't have time to get it into there being how united these guys turned into a sex cult, but they did. New Harmony, Indiana, we went over that one. I didn't know that they actually started other, everybody, it was a religious thing, but they didn't have the biblical Jesus. Same with Zion. This was a tongue-talking flat earth society of Zion, Illinois. It was a planned community, a utopian community, a banking scandal to suck people dry about 100 years ago. While it was white power world because it was always going to be a white power deal until now. We read our history through the lens of it's always been, Bill Cosby broke the color barrier in the 1960s on TV. It's always been like that. There's always been gays kissing on TV. No way. It was not in white man world when I was a boy. There was no blacks allowed on the TV. When I was a boy, it wasn't till later they were putting the, things. It was different, man. They believed in positive eugenics, the Oneida stirpiculture. I've recently stumbled across this word, experiment, at the Oneida community, another one of the religious positive eugenic experiments, utopias, planned conceptions, birth, another sex cult. That experiment lasted for the Oneida community is still making a fortune off the gorgeous cutlery and silverware that they manufacture. So it was all about, they believed in evolution, white power. Yay, go for it. That was our world. I'm sorry. I know you don't like it. I know you didn't own any slaves and you never would have. Like, I hope I never would have. But I don't know. We don't know. Man, look at all these people. It was Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. What do they call that today? The Max Planck Institute. It's where, it still is the beginning. That the Rockefeller, partially funded. It's still there. Helped keep it afloat during the Great Depression. They did it. It was always a plan. It was always the whites that did it. But it doesn't mean that the other nations are lily white. It's not like, oh, we're the Nephilim, everybody else is pure. No, the sin stains us all. We are all individually dead in our sin unless we are one called, two chosen, three faithful. That's the kicker. It's not like, oh wow, we figured out that Satan used the white guys to be the bad guys. But that doesn't mean everybody else is all like, oh, you're off the hook. Not in Christ-centered world. These spiritualist communities that, they didn't even want to talk about God, even if it was a Trinity being worshipped. It was too cumbersome, it didn't allow for extramarital sex. It didn't allow for women to, it allowed women to not have to shave their legs and use electric machines and not use a man. And somehow it's a gay thing. They just somehow they wanted to make it all into a gay thing. I feel rushed. I feel like I'm rushing myself. I need to slow down. Okay. These are only the ones that our government paid for, or they admit that they paid for these through the Substance Homestead Division of the United States Department of the Interior, founded in the New Deal, to build fake cities or claim to build fake cities or put up people and say, here's where we want you to believe in, as they studied them, maybe to see how they react. I don't know. It was up to no good. I know that. Plum Bayous caught my attention. Is it still there? Yeah, I guess. A collection of Depression era houses, part of a planned community. 180 farmsteads. Nice houses. So they didn't want to, the Beaux Art Gardens. It's still there. You could go see some of the old houses. Eleanor, well, that's Swellenor. Gee, I think you're great, Honor. Taggart Valley Homesteads Historic District. This is nice. This was the government said, let's go build this and put some people on it and see if they end up any different than the ones we put in the city. But of all their agencies, they had people where they built communities and they said, now you're paid to write the history of the world. We'll tell you the history and you write it. You're paid to act in movies. People like Burt Lancaster and, I don't know, Burgess Meredith was one of the ones that jumps into my mind. It was a paid actor by the government. We're going to teach you to act because you're an actor. They did it. I can't tell you how many I stumbled upon. It was a rabbit trail. It did take some time. Along the line, I also heard about how they did get rid of some of, and keep it white power for the capitalists because with the Bisbee deportation. Do I have anything on that? No? Did we have to get something on that? Quickly. This seems short.
This photograph captures hundreds of miners being forcibly removed from Bisbee, Arizona. So how did Bisbee reach this point of mass deportation? In July of 1917, a mining company called Bisbee Copper Queen deported more than 1,000 miners on strike to Columbus, New Mexico. The miners, most of whom were immigrants from Italy, Mexico, and Slavic states, went on strike due to their poor work conditions in the Bisbee mines.
So there's still white people. They're still white, but they were like, they had the audacity to say, you know what? If the cost of copper has gone up and they need more and we need to work harder and everybody at the top is making more money, how about you give us a raise? And they said, how about we ship you to New Mexico and bring in new workers because you're not acting white enough.
The workers would only return to the Bisbee mines if their demands were met. These demands included 2 men working together on machines, discontinuing all blastering shifts due to rock debris that injure miners, abolition of the sliding scale of wages with a flat rate of $6 for men working underground, and no discrimination against members of any organization, such as unions. The superintendent at the Copper Queen rejected their demands, which catalyzed a strike that began on June 27, 1917. So, what were the social dynamics of the Bisbee mines at the time of the strike? The Bisbee mine was referred to as a white man's camp, coined after the exclusion of Chinese miners who attempted settlement in the area. This nickname reflected the prevalent sentiments of xenophobia and white supremacy that lingered within.
You know what? I know your family never did anything wrong. You never owned any slaves. I get it. My family probably did. Snailbrook, Texas. Is this just another one of these company towns? Oh, Elon the Musk built a recent company town. It only has 12 inhabitants in 2023, but I guess it's, it's going to have 2 pickleball courts, pool. Some people are going to be living pretty nice. Well, wait, they're going to have a Montessori. So they're going to have some people who are only going to be paying $800 a month. But you have to realize that if you get laid off, you have to move out within a month. It's going to be utopia. Kanye went there. Oh, he's involved in the planning. He's not P. Diddy. She's involved in it too. She's a musician, singer, songwriter, and a comedian, I think, or a record producer. Her lyrics often touch on science fiction with feminist themes. Women power. Really, it's kind of like until Black Panther, white women power. But anyway.
Especially in South Asia, will immediately make the connection with the tragic partition of India and Pakistan in 1947, and then the sort of the second version of that in 1971 when Bangladesh divided off from Pakistan, West and East Pakistan. And John Darwin is a historian of the British Empire. He would be absolutely aware of that association, and he applies that idea to what happened, not just in Europe, the Iron Curtain of the Cold War, but in Eurasia. There was a partition of Eurasia implemented after 1945. Yes, the world formed.
Oh, wow. And there was a new constitution in the United States where people had to swear a new vow that they hadn't been taken over by subversion or any other way, or you didn't get any money. How much do we really know after Missile World, after Rocket World, after Eugenic World, when they saw that world was ending because they were so outnumbered? And it turned out that they weren't the smartest, according to IQ tests, that white people aren't the smartest or even close.
The United Nations, yes. Some of the old empires started to break down, but they survived. And a new player, the United States, with its main alliance, NATO, was formed. And it had a great rival in the Soviet Union.
No, is NATO still involved in anything?
And communist China. And between those two new, I guess, superpowers, the communist.
Yeah, what? Ew, whoa, dude, where are we now?
and a commercial culture made for mass consumption were the best guarantees of wealth and stability.
I love the father so much because I had no idea what he was going to say, but the father did.
To refuse to adopt them was a hostile act against progress and peace. Unilateralism and universalism were harmless foibles in an isolationist power. In the world's only superpower, they became the chief elements of an imperial outlook. Wedded to the use of a coercive diplomacy or armed intervention, they were the high road to empire in which perpetual war abroad would subvert democracy.
Wow. I wonder if they made that work. Now, China, are they really don't believe in vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. They're out for vengeance. They're really mad because in their mind, they're the total victim. They don't believe that there's anything bad in them. Anything bad they've done is because they were so peaceful and calm, and the white people forced drugs on them, and now they're mad and they really want to kill you. And they don't care if you eat your children first.
At home. There's an old joke, which there's a joke from Eastern Europe today that maybe I've heard it, Hungarians talk about it, that America put so much effort into exporting democracy abroad that they had left no democracy back at home. And this brings us to John Darwin's discussion in 2007, I remind you, about whether this unlimited empire would last. It would seem an extraordinary, unbalanced nature of world affairs. And yet we know that some of those key facts about economic power and whatnot have changed very significantly. The United States is no longer 5 times the size of China's economy. Indeed, in real terms, China's economy is significantly larger than the United States.
They knew it. They planned it. We're living it. So the helical heart, we live in an era of substantial progress in understanding myocardial structure and function at genetic, molecular, and microscopic levels. Yet ventricular myocardium has proven remarkably resilient to macroscopic analysis of functional anatomy. Wait. I don't get to see the pictures of this. Oh, well. The heart, helical heart thing. A blue gene. I'm reading that I look like I'm reading something last night or today about biochemical society transactions. Celebrate the emergence of systems biology as a discipline. They're happy about it. So blue jeans, to me, blue jeans are something that you wear, not here. So everybody seems like is on drugs except me. Oh, it's a project. It was an IBM project. December 1999, it announced a United States $100 million research initiative for a 5-year effort to build a massively parallel computer at 220. That's the year 220. So it was planned a while ago, but now they've hit the ground running. wow, going back in November 2004, a 16 rack system, not very big, with each rack holding 1,024 computer nodes, achieved the first top 500 list with a lynch pack performance. Okay, by teraflops or something. Overtook the Earth simulator. It's funny because all of these are, you know, computers I'm going to show you are based on figuring out how can we, what's the best way to use our nuclear weapons. I don't even know why a petascale design calls for Q is just the letter after P. Blue Gene. The Summit supercomputer that was developed by IBM at Oak Ridge. And again, the Oak Ridge was faked as like, let's fake the atomic weapon so that we can claim we have weapons that can destroy the whole world. This also is now energy efficient because somehow these things are sucking all the water out of the world. This isn't causing the world to go dry. These computers require water. It's like we don't have enough water. Was this one of the early supercomputers? They've always had these in mind. They always needed these, upgraded. Right now, they've got us hooked up and ready to go. Don't we have to have our computer? Sometimes back in the day, these guys, they didn't have computers, but they still had fake money. And with that fake money, anyway, this was weird.
Bernhard Kruger was imprisoned by the Allies for 3 years and spent part of that time helping the French Secret Service forge documents and passports. In the mid-1950s, he was brought before a denazification court. Some of his former prisoners spoke in his defense.
He was very good to us, but as for anything else that he may have done wrong, I couldn't say. Anyway, we signed something to say he'd been nice to us.
He was a savior. He saved a lot. Admittedly, it was done for personal reasons too, but unquestionably, he had saved the lives of all those prisoners. No question about it.
What prisoners? Well, they were making money.
Architect.
They all lived. And somehow they printed $3 billion worth of English fake money. They claimed they found it all and destroyed it. It didn't affect the world. I'm having my doubts.
Tried to incorporate the ideology of concentration camps into the design. One modern feature was a system of total control. From one point, a single machine gun was supposed to be able to control the entire 68 barracks of the camp. This was, as we say, the geometry of terror.
The Operation Bernhard recruits were isolated from the other prisoners in 2 separate blocks, a prison within a prison. One he found was the artist Peter Adel, who varied his work on the fake pounds by making secret sketches of his fellow inmates, hidden from the SS guards and preserved throughout the war.
I was very lucky.
Isn't this convenient that they have this story to tell us now?
In fact, every month the fakes were taken 800 miles under armed guard to a castle in the Italian Alps. Schloss Labers, overlooking the resort town of Merano, was the distribution center for the fake Bernhard millions and the headquarters of the man charged with the operation, a financial wheeler-dealer called Friedrich Schwend.
He was a very shrewd businessman, and he came with the idea that you can use the money and instead of giving it away.
Friedrich Schwend was ideally placed to put his idea into practice.
Yeah. He was a Nazi.
Had the need of money and was interested in nice girls.
They choose the best rooms, of course. They had their own carpets and their own.
These guys that were, you know, freed because they made all the money for the Germans knew, oh, wow, we're going to lose the war. What are we going to do with all this money?
There's a liability on the bank. It was during this archaic process that a clerk spotted in a bundle of returned notes one that had already been marked in the ledger as paid off.
So either the one that had been paid before was a forgery, or this one was a forgery, and it turned out to be this one. And the principal of the office, on seeing this note, described it as the most dangerous he'd ever seen. I think people understand that money is important during life, but it's also equally can be a matter of life and death during wartime.
Look at the closet, full of blood. So hand marks. He said, put your hand on there, you can manage it. He said, it's still wet. I said, no, I don't put my hand on a wet. It is blood. I see nothing but bullet holes.
The barracks had been cleared for Kruger's men by killing the previous inmates.
Our Gestapo guards, they say, we had nothing to do with it. We need a sleeping area. And they killed the people years before you came in.
Knowing this could be their own death chamber.
But he kept them alive because they knew how to make the money.
Kruger disappeared, and so did most of the money. In the final days of the war, Ida Weissenbacher was living on her family farm near Lake Toplitz in the Austrian mountains.
At 5 a.m., 2 SS men came and knocked at the door. I got up with my grandfather and went outside. Hitch up your horses, they called out, because we need carts at Lake Toplitz.
Ida and her neighbors were ordered to help the SS cart 70 heavy crates to the lake.
Anyway, that's part of the story, but the way he got away, you know, he used that money to buy a Red Cross passport, and moved to South America like everybody else.
As you can probably imagine.
Back at Ebensee, the guards knew the Americans were closing in.
After 2 nights in the SS barracks, and the third group has not
Notice
arrived,
they're still alive. They made
our
it.
own SS decided to save their own skin, to be free to move around and switch their uniforms, said, let them in.
Kruger's SS men handed groups 1 and 2 over to the guards at Ebensee and fled.
We entered on May the 5th in the morning. This was a miracle because on the same day...
With the war lost, Schwendt and his agents looked to their own survival, and the Bernhard millions still had a part to play.
At the end of the war, Schwendt took precautions enough, first of all, to get a false identity, including a card saying that he is working for the International Red Cross. He understood that it's getting too hot here to stay in Europe, and he decided to go away from Europe like other Nazis to South America. The Bernhard pounds were crucial for financing the flight of the Nazis.
We have some evidence that...
So there, you know, let's put that in the mix as we continue. You know, our life's not over. They still believe in these programs. They spend all their money. There are people who believe in it. And, you know, Crossroads is a Trinity replacement, a tri-lab computing resource. That's it, 2022. Everything's Trinity. It's the new deal. It's what everybody wants. And in the meantime, there was Francisco Torrance Guasp, Paco, Spanish cardiologist whose research focused on anatomy. The Lord, you know, when I was studying how the stones cried out, this became a part of my life. I went on an ill-advised trip to rescue somebody but you know, you live and you learn. I ended up picking up a guy, couldn't speak English. My español es muy fea. So, but we communicated. gave him water, gave him a ride, wished I could do more. He gave me a bracelet. It's gold and silver. I wore it. I started wearing jewelry. I started calling myself Paco. I found this guy, and he explained how the heart's, was a pump. It wasn't a pump. Anyway. This guy, how come we never study this guy? I'm going to leave this one up and somehow try to tie this in. This is the great grandfather of Genghis Khan. Right here, Kublai Khan. And all came from this guy, and or he's related to them. On the other side, seems like the same picture, Just another form of their hiding Christ, rewriting history. There was a Tartaria, there was a 1,000-year reign. Somehow they want us to believe this crazy world together, but I mean, there's the guy's grave. We have some sort of a history, and we have the Bible. We know that in Revelation 19, the part of the vision that changed the world, when the Lord showed me, the full fury of the wrath of God, and on his robe, his thigh, his name was written. I kept reading, that after the beast was captured and the false prophet who had done those signs by which he deceived those who received the mark and those who worshiped the image, that those two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. And I remembered they didn't have these chapter breaks, and I know that Satan was there, and I realized, okay, well, wait, he was captured, the beast and the false prophet thrown into the lake of fire, but Satan at that same time was thrown into a bottomless pit for Celia. 1,000, 10 times 10 times 10. The word Celia, 1,000 here, means 10 times 10 times 10. It can't mean anything else. It meant a prison sentence of exactly 1,000 years. And then later, when the 1,000 years are over, he's released and going to come out and deceive the nations. I started teaching this in 2016. Sounds like almost 10 years ago, huh? And nothing's ever changed. And there's going to be he's going to make nations and come against and surround the camp of the saints that are going to be rescued by fire. And then there's the great white throne of judgment, where you're going to be judged by according to what you do. They were judged according to what they had done. And we're told that this is what's going to happen. And this man was at the lecture given. This is a 2015, where he learned from Paco that there's a helix in the heart, and it's a rope, and that the medical community to this day are faking it until they make it. And by make it, they mean you dying alone until things get so bad you consider eating your children.
The spirals going in different directions. This is a dead heart, but you're seeing the anatomy going in different directions. In the atrium and the ventricle, I call it defect. And then you go to 45 days, you have a person 100 million years ago.
So still, this is how they're going to teach it. They're not going to give God the glory for creating it. They're not going to say the stones are crying out, they're reserved in judgment. They're going to only admit that there is, they didn't know how the heart worked until Torrance, Paco, Guasp stuck to it and said, no, this is how it has to be.
That is, as you look at the ventricle here, you see the spiral formation, and you see the helix. The minute you just simply stretch the ventricle and have just the transverse part, the part on that you see in the basal loop, it doesn't contract as effectively. And if you look at the diseases we see people who have heart it together a bit, put a patch in there, close ventricle, and it's done. You know, I was in a plane one time called imagination. Imagination is you have to see what is, not what you want to see. Back at where you had this twisting formation of the heart, and there was a famous cardiologist named Erasistratus, lived 280 BC. And he talked about the heart twisting as I showed you in that movie a little bit ago. And he was an interesting guy because he was a physician, and the son of the king would go crazy looking at the king's wife. And the king really realized that the arrhythmia, the funny heart rhythm he had, was because the son couldn't get the king's wife. So the king divorced his wife, and his son got better. So I thought that was kind of an interesting
Weird.
in our fingertips. If you look at your finger, and the finger next to you is a spiral. But your finger is different than somebody else's finger. And that's because there's harmony and variance. And not only is the fingertip have a spiral, but there's a spiral at the tip of your heart. Perhaps the tip of your heart is your apical fingertip. And if you look at the ventricle, which is the beating part of the heart, has a spiral.
Now, I have with acid shown these, you know, dissolved it down to just leave the muscle. The stones are crying out. This is how it happened.
You can see it here.
This is how I
Look
learned
at
it
that ventricle.
in 2015. This is how I explained it to Stellium 7, who still, you know, he might have just, you know, coined the term biology is geology is biology, but he learned it from me, and even, you know, he promotes Torrance wasp.
You see the spirals just like we saw just a few moments ago. You see it goes from inside out and outside in. That spiral is very typical. It goes down to the apex of the heart, the tip of the heart, which is a vortex, the thing that really makes the heart a part of an active way of living. And it
of the function of the heart. I realized that besides the systolic action, ejection of blood, there should exist a diastolic action of the heart to suck blood.
In the early 1950s, as a fourth-year medical student at Salamanca University in Spain, Francisco Torrent Guas began an anatomical study of the heart to prove scientifically that his theory and the early observations of Erasistratus, Galen, and others were indeed correct.
I start making dissections of any animals I put arrive to my hands, from sharks, from the fishes, from snakes,
From cows.
Was running from the root of the pulmonary artery to the root of the aorta, describing a helicoid in this space. And you see that in this helicoid is delimited a right ventricular cavity and the left ventricular cavity. And that is really my contribution to the knowledge of the macroscopic structure of the heart.
What you are about to see is the dissection of the myocardial ventricular band performed. This sulcus is crossed by aberrant fibers coming from the anterior.
Now, this is how come the hearts look like they do in the rocks.
Aorta. In this manner, the free wall of the right ventricle can be opened, revealing the right ventricular cavity.
And that's why the stones break and leaves different patterns when they break on those cracks, the break points.
A second anatomical fact to observe is represented by the posterior limit of the right ventricular cavity, where the free wall and septum meet. Here begins a cleavage plane that must be followed all the way to the root of the aorta. At this point, you can see, once again following the direction of the fibers, how they descend into the well of the left ventricle. Next, Torrent Guasp cuts the left fibrous trigon and follows the descending fibers, separating them from the more superficial ones. Turning the heart around and looking at the septum, a third anatomical
You can do this with the rocks.
fact can now be observed. Here you can see two layers of fibers. One runs up almost vertically to the aorta, while these fibers cross almost horizontally. A cleavage plane is in this way defined between the two layers. Torrent Guasp continues the dissection, following the cleavage plane, separating the two layers. Then, by cutting the right trigon, he is able to free the aorta and unravel the myocardial band. The ventricular myocardial band, running from the root of the pulmonary artery to the root of the aorta. A singular muscular band that twists and loops like a rope into a helical structure loop, which runs from the pulmonary artery to the posterior interventricular sulcus, constitutes the free wall of the right ventricle. The left segment of the basal loop, which ends near the aorta, belongs to the left free wall.
And this is the man who gives conferences about what Dr. Lepaco taught.
That way. And for years, people had wondered why that happened in the septum, why the heart looked that way. And I realized this was really a spiral, and I began to think about spirals, and I began to understand that the spirals are almost the master plan of nature in terms of structure and in terms of rhythm. And if you begin to look at spirals, if you look at a spiral simply and pick the middle of the spiral up, you'd form a helix. Of course, the heart is a helix.
Using a unique imaging technique to
So really, that's where we're at. The Lord will have more for us tomorrow, Lord willing. We can talk about what's going on in America. I'm going to be sending a link to RJ, but that's where we're at. This is how I live. I tell people, yeah, this is the heart. This is it. I call myself Salt Paco based on this man, Franciscan Torrance Francisco Paco Guasp. That's my life. I want it to be your life. I'm not looking for a utopia. I'm looking for people to read the Bible and understand that it is a flat earth nation. The golden age has passed because the mud flood was Armageddon. So there had to be that 1,000-year reign already over. That's what Jesus taught. And then he was loosed. The Rosicrucians, Freemasons, straggling fugitives have done something involving institutionalizing people, lobotomizing people, criminalizing people. And yet our parents and grandparents, they made it. We were conditioned to believe all of the nonsense, but God is going to have a people who are one called, two chosen, three faithful. I hope you're one of them. Me and my friends are never going to tell you anything else. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nakame. That's how I like to say goodbye. Thank you, Marcella. Appreciate it. And you guys better believe that the Chinese have perfected the propaganda. Adios.